Every idea starts with a spark.
Legacy. We know what it looks like. A name on the side of a building, a statue in a public square, something permanent, something that outlasts you. But what if legacy weren't monumental at all? What if it were small, catalytic, set in motion long before anyone noticed? In 2019, I stood in front of a bronze statue in downtown Atlanta and realized I had my own understanding of legacy all backward. By my side was a kid named Kenneth Lockett, and before us stood the larger-than-life figure of a name familiar to nearly all of Atlanta, Henry Grady. As we stood in front of Grady's statue, surprised that we'd only just noticed it, after having been students at Georgia State University for some time, our eyes fell to the inscription proudly displayed beneath Grady's feet: journalist, orator, patriot. For the uninitiated, Henry Grady was a prolific writer and editor of the Atlanta Constitution. He is credited, among other things, with coining the term the New South, a quasi-marketing political phrase he used to urge a post-Confederate Georgia to industrialize and reintegrate with the Union. To Kenneth and I, Grady seemed like he had legacy figured out. In addition to his statue, his name adorns one of the largest public hospitals in the United States. The College of Journalism at the University of Georgia bears his name, and so did, until a few years ago, a high school in Midtown Atlanta. Now, by this point, Kenneth and I were good friends. I was the editor of the student paper. He was an opinions writer, having just left his post in the Student Government Association and eager to use our pages to argue well-researched issues. And so, it was perhaps this shared love for good journalism that catalyzed in our minds a question as we stood before Grady's statue. Why was this man so revered? What did he do more than a century ago to earn such prolific respect and admiration? To answer that question, we began making regular trips to the university library's Special Archives Division. And there we would pore over old photographs and snippets of Grady's writings, eager to unravel the history behind the name. But what awaited us in those archives was more troubling than we expected. News stories soaked with racism. Headlines written by Grady laden with alliteration that glorified lynchings and dehumanized Black Americans. We came to understand that there were two meanings to Grady's New South. When Grady would travel north and speak before Union audiences, as he often did to court investment in the South, he painted the New South as a rapidly industrializing region eager to reunite after the war. But when Grady returned south and spoke before Confederate audiences he was more comfortable, more familiar with, Grady took on an entirely different tone. He was conniving, calculated, hell-bent on one thing: preserving white supremacy in a post-Civil War America. Grady, we found, was eager to use his power, his wealth, his influence, and yes, his newspaper to effect this goal. He used the pages of the Atlanta Constitution to promote racist ideology and even became a political kingmaker, being attributed with helping to elect a KKK member as Georgia governor. By this point, Kenneth was activated, outraged, and so were we. So we did what any good student journalist would do. We began writing. Choosing to direct our focus toward that statue we found on Marietta Street, we penned an open letter to then Mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, urging her to take a stand against it. When our papers hit stands a few weeks later, the story went immediately viral. And Kenneth, as the lead Black author of the piece, was thrust into the spotlight. Over the course of the next 72 hours, TV stations across the city interviewed Kenneth, eager to hear a Black man's perspective on Atlanta's newfound racist iconography. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution picked up the story, and then Newsweek, and then the Associated Press, carrying our small but mighty newspaper's argument across the nation. Kenneth, another co-author, and I were invited for a 60-minute style interview with a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. When the storm quieted, Kenneth and I did what we always did: returned to our basement student newsroom and debated. We thought back to that idea of legacy and realized we had something a little backward. Grady's statue was no more his legacy than painted flames made a car faster. Legacy, you see, was a weighty concept to us. It evoked durability, respect, impact. I thought, frankly, we'd have our entire lives to figure out whether that were something we wanted to build for ourselves one day. That's when it clicked. Grady understood something about legacy that we hadn't yet. Legacy isn't about what the world builds in reverence to you after you're gone. It's the systems you set in motion while you're still here. Grady was a catalyst, albeit for something insidious. And his true legacy wasn't marble and bronze. It was the institutions he built, the ideologies he propagated, the chain reaction of events that outlasted him by generations. It was almost 3 years to the day after we published that story that I got a phone call. I was 2 years into my career at the New York Times. Doors had opened for me in part because of what Kenneth and I built together. And I was sure the same could soon be said for him, that he would graduate college, he would go on to become a civil rights attorney, a politician, a journalist, or anything that his sense of service above self called him to. But the voice on the other end of the line brought my world to a standstill. Kenneth was gone. He was 22, just months away from graduating. The inexplicability of it, the irrationality of it, that the world had lost someone so devoted to making it a better place, and the anger I felt that Kenneth had lost his chance to build the legacy I knew he was capable of. A legacy, frankly, that would have been far more inclusive, far more visionary, and far more empathetic than Grady's. Mayor Bottoms never did respond to our letter. Despite our well-reasoned arguments and Kenneth's clarity and passion that won over every reporter he spoke to, the news cycle came and went. And ultimately, our viral editorial settled into the footnotes of Henry Grady's Wikipedia page. I thought this entire time it was Grady teaching me about legacy. The power, the influence, the wealth, the reverence still for his name 136 years after his death. But really it was Kenneth. All along, Kenneth was teaching me confidence, to share my ideas far and wide because they are good and worth it, not because I'm waiting for a response from someone. Kenneth was teaching me compassion, to ask myself, if not me, then who, and use the voice and the platform I do have to stand up in service of those who don't have that same privilege. Kenneth was teaching me fearlessness, to challenge the mighty, the connected, the powerful, even if it meant losing opportunities, friends, advertisers. In the wake of his passing, I kept returning to that idea of legacy, in part because it was the only compass I had left to make sense of my grief. And that's when I realized legacy is not about what the world builds for you. It is what the world continues building because of you. I didn't want to build Kenneth a statue. I didn't want to put his name on the side of a building. Those tributes would have honored his name more than the actual values he lived by every day. So I created the Kenneth Lockett Foundation, because honoring my friend shouldn't just be about remembering him, it should be about multiplying him. Our foundation is small but mighty, just like our student newspaper was. Right now, we support one fellowship, just one. We take a college junior or senior and give them a well-paid full-time summer fellowship in law, public service, or journalism, exactly the same kind of work Kenneth had already devoted his life to doing. Our first partner sits just one block away from that infamous statue on Marietta Street, the Southern Center for Human Rights, a nationally recognized law organization fighting for justice in the same city Henry Grady once fought to preserve oppression within. Kenneth would have loved the irony. Now, we could try to scale this, turn one fellow into 50, build a sprawling nonprofit with Kenneth's name on the letterhead. But wouldn't that be missing the point entirely? Kenneth didn't make an impact by reaching thousands or millions of people. He made an impact by reaching one. By showing up as one person, investing in one friendship, having one conversation at a time in a basement student newsroom. One person is enough. One meaningful experience is enough. One friend who sees your potential and challenges you to live up to it is enough to fundamentally alter the trajectory of your life. I am living proof of that. The only reason I am on this stage before you today is because one 19-year-old in a basement student newsroom decided to act, to care, and to tell the truth out loud. Kenneth didn't live to see 23, but his legacy is still unfolding. Through me, through the fellows that we will mentor, through the work that continues in his name, whether anybody knows that it started with him or not. One person is enough. Zoom out and you see this pattern everywhere. The people who truly changed your life, I bet you they didn't have their name on the side of a building. They weren't statues. They were people, catalysts. Maybe it was a teacher who saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself. A friend who challenged you when everyone else stayed silent. Or maybe it was just someone who showed up at exactly the right moment and changed everything for you. And whether they knew it or not at the time, their actions ultimately became an indelible part of your story. And somewhere, your legacy is already playing out in the lives of the people you have impacted. So if you take just one thing from this story, let it be this. You don't need the massive platform. You don't need perfect timing. You don't need a statue with your name on it. You just need one connection, one friend, one colleague, one young person trying to find their way, and the willingness to ask yourself, if not me, then who? Thank you.